Hello, hello, and welcome to another exciting episode of Skeptics and Seekers Sunday Sermon. This is 4S. I'm David Johnson. Let's get started with Mac, who is with us today. Mac, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right.
I'm
Can't
gonna
complain.
good. Well, you could. I it's, you just choose not to. You're using your free will to choose not to complain. Um, I don't use my free will that way. I complain when I need to. Um, and we will go ahead and say hello to Brian I, who I don't see and probably wouldn't see when he shows up. But just understand, folks, that he has a standing invitation. He's usually the ghost in the machine lurking in the background. You know, he might say things in comments, um, stuff like that. You don't see the comments. Sorry. By the way, Mac, if you want to open your chat in case Brian does show up, he might say things in chat that you see that I won't because I'm not even opening mine up. Um,
Gotcha.
the secret to having a gallery of people is to ignore them. that's that's how you do it and not get distracted. Also, you can be severely visually impaired so that you can't see what they're writing anyway. That all helps. We have got a video to finish, and so without much further ado, we're going to finish the video that we started. It's been a very interesting video so far. This is Jonathan. I've forgotten his last name, but I think we're going to get into some interesting stuff. I anticipate some interesting conversation with Mac and I. And honestly, whether or not we finish this video, we're going to end it today. Uh,
Yeah.
because the more interesting thing for these shows, as far as I'm concerned, is not the video, it's the conversation that we have about the video. So the show is not about the video, it's about the conversation. The video is just a delivery mechanism for good conversation. So here we go.
When Israel turned away from God, they began offering up their own children. And the only thing that ended child sacrifice in the world, you know what it was? It was the gospel. It was the name of Jesus. That tells you how right your faith is. But the ancient warning is, if a nation ever turns away from God, the spirits will come back. And so the destroyer, known in Hebrew as Molech, he returns and comes into our culture, comes to America like clockwork. First, the possessor, the turning away. Secondly, the enchantress sexual revolution. Third, it leads to the destroyer. At the end of the 1960s, America begins offering up its own children.
Okay. He said something kind of interesting. I just want to do a reality check here. He said the only thing that ended child sacrifice, child sacrifice was the gospel. Um, so you mean that that every culture in the past committed child sacrifice? Is it every culture, or is he just talking about a handful of cultures? Because that's one confusing point right there, because there were plenty of cultures that didn't have child sacrifice. So something ended it for them. I am quite certain that there were cultures that did have it at one point, but as we socially evolved, they didn't have it well before the gospel, or certainly well before a time when they would have heard the Christian gospel. The second piece of this reality check question is, are you telling me that there is no child sacrifice today? That there are no cultures that do child sacrifice? So I don't understand that claim that the gospel ended child sacrifice. Can you help me out?
Um, so I know of a tribe in Indonesia that uh what happens is child sacrifice it's a multifaceted term. Like it doesn't necessarily mean the same thing for different people. So back to the tribe in Indonesia, what they do is if let's say a woman gives birth to twins, um, they'll take one of the twins and they'll like leave them in the forest to die, and then they'll keep the other twin because they feel like the other one is a copy, is like an evil copy of them or something.
Mhm.
So like that's one form. So now not every culture does like not every culture like kills babies like that. Uh and so I think what he means is that lots of cultures have had these weird uh if you want to call them superstitions to kill children for some weird reason. And you see it all over the world still to this day, and especially in cultures where there's no Christianity.
Okay, I get that, but I think my question slash objections still stand. Maybe someone can comment on that further in the comments. But I would also throw in this bit of color. If we're going to say that child sacrifice can mean a number of things, it was the Jewish culture, the Jewish God, and the Mosaic law that allowed them to offer up their children as to dedicate their children to the temple and maybe be raised by the priests, the firstborn or something like that. There you can find in the Bible, in the Old Testament, this idea of dedication to children, and to get your child back, to redeem your child, you paid an offering. It was a certain amount for boys and a different amount for girls, lesser amount because girls were not as valuable. But it
No,
was,
that's not it.
well, okay. Doesn't matter whether I'm not going to get lost on why the values for girls and boys were different, but that existed in the Jewish culture. Now that seems like a type of child sacrifice if we're going to talk about it metaphorically.
Well, I don't understand how it becomes the same thing because you're not like sacrifice means giving up something that costs you dearly, right? Like you're just giving it up permanently, and it feels like
Right,
you're
like the
combining that with
no,
child
like the man, for
sacrifice.
instance,
Like
who said to God, help me win this war, and the first thing that comes out of my house, I will sacrifice to you. And it was his daughter, and he was all sad, and she was like, "Oh, don't worry, it's fine." And so there is debate whether that sacrifice was an actual sacrifice, killing that he carried through, or whether he had to give her up and she had to go, live as a monk or something like that. But it was still giving up something of value to him. So by that definition, it's still a sacrifice.
right, but it's not in the same way that at least uh, the speaker is talking about. He's referring to uh, killing children out of a sense of I don't know convenience or some kind of religious duty. That's where he's
Okay, but
planting
this
his
this was
flag.
a religious duty too, and it's not like God said no, don't
No,
don't
well,
offer
if
that
you're referring
sacrifice.
to Jephthah, right, the
Jeff,
guy in
that's it.
Judges, right,
Yeah. Hmm.
um, that entire scenario is not condoned by God. Like the way he makes the vow, even uh, he makes a rash vow, and the whole theme of the book of Judges is how the Israelites had forgotten how they were supposed to serve God, and that it was supposed to be separate from the rest of the nations around them. So a similar thing happens in I think it's in Greek history where uh, I think it's Agamemnon who like who says, okay, if I win this battle, I'm going to sacrifice my daughter, and he wins, and then he has to do it because everyone heard him make that vow, so he has to kill his daughter. But the Israelites were never under such a idea, like, or such a yoke of doing something like that.
Okay.
They
Well,
had to they had to make their vows and not be like the other nations around them. That was the whole premise of them getting the promised land.
I've already rested on this spot too long. We can come back to it if there's time for an after show. You can hit me in the comments. You know where they are. Skeptics and Seekers. .squarespace.com. Log in your Discuss account, discuss away. You can send an email to skepticsandseekers at gmail.com. And we will get back to this because there's more discussion on this uh, video that I would like to have. Thank you, Mac. Good, good discussion. I've got a feeling we're not done with it.
This is the most pagan of acts. It's the crown of paganization. Israel offered up thousands of its children to the gods. America has offered up millions of its children. We won't go into it, but in the book I looked at the ancient elements of child sacrifice, the rituals, and you can see them manifest in abortion today. I'll mention just one thing. It was the children of the poor, more than any other, that were lifted up to this God. And that's why today it's the children of the poor that are lifted up and killed in their mother's womb more than any other.
Okay, you know that's going to have a little bit of commentary. Oh, I had forgotten this was coming. Okay, so bear with me. But this goes back to what I was saying about child sacrifice. So if Jesus, I mean, if you can define it this loosely, great. Then Jesus didn't end child sacrifice because abortion's been going on in Christian communities forever. So there, you can say, oh, well, it got worse during it. But yeah, but we didn't invent abortion. America didn't invent abortion. So,
Right. So,
so it
like,
didn't, if this is child sacrifice, then Jesus didn't end child sacrifice.
well, he's not trying to say that Jesus like ended it entirely, because obviously it's still happening. He's saying that America, compared to the pagan nations, like, we're not, like, even though we're separated by 1,000 years or so, whatever, we're still not all that different from them, like, in terms of like how they used to do things. Like, they
Right.
used to
Then his point
kill
is
kids
lost.
because,
You
what's
can't
that?
have, his point is lost. You can't have it both ways. You can't say that Jesus ended child sacrifice and that child
Well,
sacrifice is even worse today.
like, again, how I'm understanding him to mean it is like, if when a culture is penetrated by Christianity, then killing of babies and children goes down, like, or it goes away. It's not, it
Except he's
doesn't.
saying
Okay.
they did it by the thousands and we did it by the millions. So it
Well, yeah.
not only did it not go away, but it increased in the Christian nation. And Christians
Well,
for the longest time not many Christians, I would say, for the longest time didn't have a problem with it. And
America's not a Christian nation, though.
okay, but throughout the world, Christendom has not, uh, it's, I, this is a tough one
Right.
because of
Okay.
course
So let me
there've
try
always
and
been
make
some
his
Christians that
argument.
were
Yeah.
against it, but there were always Christians that weren't. And I know we've got the Catholic Church, who's I think probably always been against it, but the Catholic Church is not the only brand of Christian.
Right. But like, the point that he's making is this, like, from his video. And this isn't my point. This is his point. He's saying that when Christians, like, according to his whole thesis, is that when a nation follows God, then this stuff doesn't happen. There's no demonic influences. There's no old spirits coming back and tormenting the people. But when people start disobeying God, then these spirits come back and they torment people. And now people start sacrificing their babies like they used to in the past. Like,
Okay.
that's what he's saying.
Well, then we've got
And
more conversation around that, so I'm just gonna kind of cut you off because I know that we're gonna get back to that. That's going to be a large piece of discussion, so I want to make sure
right. And
that we set that up
I'm trying to represent the guy fairly, because that's his argument. And
right. And by
yeah,
the way, I'm not trying to suggest that his argument is your argument. So you don't even have to feel obligated to defend it. I'm not
Right, right.
painting
But
this on you or on all Christians. I'm commenting on this sermon. Um, and so feel free to distance yourself from anything that you need to distance yourself from. I think this guy's wrong about a lot of things and things that you may or may not agree with. But
right, but I
he,
also don't want to like pick on him and mischaracterize what he says
okay,
unfairly because he's not saying that Christianity ended child sacrifice in the sense of like, okay, now there's no more child sacrifice. Maybe he didn't articulate it properly, but what he's saying is that when a culture is permeated with Christianity and people are truly Christians, then this stuff doesn't happening. But if
okay,
it's not
but
around, then
i-
yeah,
in
then it
that
happens.
but in that case, I would still object to it on the basis that you had Judaism before Christianity. And one could argue that Judaism, when practiced properly, would also have ended child sacrifice. So
Right.
there's nothing special about Christianity that ends child sacrifice that would have been different from Judaism. So you can say if people were practicing Judaism correctly, if people were obeying God correctly, then child sacrifice comes to an end. But what he said is that the only thing that ended child sacrifice is Christianity, and I think that is an incoherent, non-theological idea.
Well, he could have been more accurate by saying Judeo-Christianity, but he just said Christianity because that's what he identifies himself as. He's not like a messianic Jew, I don't think. So he'll go with Christianity because the Old Testament is part of Christian scriptures anyway.
At this point, we had to edit for the sake of time, and so here is a later part of the conversation in progress.
Right, but then supporting uh if you're supporting humans, changing their gender and becoming sterile for the sake of happiness or perceived happiness or whatever, then how, from a survivalist perspective, are you showing that you care about the future of humanity? Because
Yeah,
let's say,
I don't believe in survival at all costs. So you're mixing a few
so wait,
things together. Um,
survival at all cost is the goal of every single society, right? Like,
no.
no. Okay, so if Nazis showed up, they say, "Are you hiding people, hiding Jews?" You'd be like, you tell them the truth, and then they'd kill you. I'm just I'm asking.
Yeah,
I want to know.
you're mixing a lot of things together,
No,
which makes this kind of
no, I'm just
conversation hard.
asking a question about whether you'd say yes or no, because if survival isn't the highest goal, naturalistically, then what is? Because there has to be something that's at the very
Well,
top.
okay, so what you said was for societies.
Okay.
Now you're asking on an individual level, which
Well,
is a
I'm
different
asking
thing.
both. I'm
And
asking both.
what I said, just to understand where the context is switching here, is that I care about life in a way that secularists understand human life. I care all the way up until that is no more. Not
Me
my
too.
life, not I'm talking about life itself. So the fact that you think that life goes on further than me is fine. That's the only place we differ. But then you try to suggest that I only care about it until I die,
No,
which is not what I said
I
at
was
all.
asking the question, do you care? And you said no. So now I know because I know people who say, well, it's only up to when I die, and then who cares what happens after I die because I'll be too dead to care.
Well,
That's what
okay,
some people say, but I'm not saying it's you.
I will in fact be too dead to care, but I do want humanity. I mean, it. I'm not solipsistic.
Wait,
There are people who are not me, and I want
okay,
them to really. So,
why?
I why do I want people who are not me to do well in life?
No,
I
why do you care after you're dead? Why do you care? I'm just, I'm asking,
okay,
not,
I do a lot of things so that the world will be a better place. I don't want it to be a better place and then when I die it goes to hell. That's not what I do it for. And so it sounds like you just don't understand a basic uh human catalyst here.
No,
Uh,
I just said I agree with you with what you said about I said me too when you said I care about what happens after I die,
yeah,
right? And I'm saying that there are people who say they don't care what happens after they die. And you're like,
right
okay, those are other people, right?
there.
But the
Yeah,
thing is this, like, what's the naturalistic, like, are they wrong for saying that? Like, is
uh,
it
I think that they have an unevolved sense of society, and they may even have some mental deficiency
wait,
that keeps them from uh, basic human empathy. And so I
so
think, for
so
instance, a
being a good
socio hang
person,
on, being a if you're a sociopath, you only care about what happens to you. Okay, that's part of sociopathy. You are literally incapable of caring about what happens to someone else. And so when we see that kind of behavior, uh, we don't think that that is perfectly normal behavior. We see that as a sociopathic behavior, and we try to fix it. All right. So I would look at people who think that it doesn't matter what happens to people that are not them. I would look at them as mentally uh, uh, challenged in a very severe way.
okay, but that doesn't answer my question whether what they're doing is wrong. Like, you're saying they're not evolved, but I didn't ask if they were evolved or not evolved or whatever, because everyone is different,
Then
right?
I
Everyone's got
I
their
think that
own.
you have to be then more clear about what you mean by wrong, because like I said, I think that a sociopath represents a human condition that is not healthy. It is a state of unhealth.
Well, and that's a spectrum, right? So some people say some people are more individualistic than others. But I'm asking the question about the person who just says, like, I'm going to live my life how I want, and when I die, that's it. The show's over.
Right,
That's it.
and I think that that person could be somewhere on the sociopathic spectrum, if we can invent a
So,
spectrum here. Now,
but they're not a bad
to some,
person. They're not
uh,
necessarily a bad person.
a person with a broken leg is not a bad person, but they're still broken.
Oh,
Um,
like their empathy thing is broken
yes,
because they don't
b-
care past
yes,
their death.
I'm trying to be more of an empathetic person myself and not call people bad who are broken. Because I think that bad and good are not even good descriptors of people. We are people, and we do some things that are socially beneficial. We do some things that are socially harmful. We do a lot of things that are socially neutral. Um, and some people they do more things that are socially good. Sometimes they do bigger things that are even more socially good. Sometimes people do even bigger things that are more socially bad. So there's kind of a spectrum there. But I don't think that we get to say that person over there is bad in some way beyond that. And I think that when you say it, you have some other meaning that I don't. And so I don't
I think we have the same meaning when we say someone like Hitler's a bad person.
okay,
We have the same meaning.
tell me what you mean.
We mean that he's flawed. Like there's a certain way human beings should act, and he didn't do it. And
Sure,
ex-
I would say that he was broken in some way. I'm not
you
his
wouldn't call him
psychoanalyst.
you wouldn't call him evil or a
No,
bad
I
person.
would not use that word.
Okay, well,
Only unless
I find
I was
that
speaking.
problematic.
Okay,
Hmm.
well, then that's what I mean, that when you say bad, you mean something that I don't, and you have to, because I've been very clear on what I mean.
Yeah, you then, like, they're not evolved in things that they should be evolved in, but maybe I guess they think that they're evolved and you're not evolved.
Sure,
So,
and they're free to
uh,
think that.
so it's a big
However,
problem for
however,
humans then.
we are social creatures, and we are going to put you in a mental institution.
Oh,
Uh,
until
if
they put you in a concentration camp because they think you're the problem. So it's always a shift in there's nothing there's
yeah,
nothing dividing.
it's
That's
there's no way that you're going to get to a place where all of humanity is sociopaths, and you're just trying to you're
really
trying to yeah, really, you're trying to equate a specific kind of mental illness
no, I'm not
with
it's not
normal
okay, wait.
humanity, as if
So
somehow
wait a minute. What happens in places like North Korea where they shut themselves off? You think like they're mentally ill up there?
no, I think that in some very real ways they are imprisoned and enslaved, and I think that the fact that the world is okay with that makes some of the moral cries that we have with things like the situation in Israel or other places where things happen that we do care about. It leaves me not having any respect for anyone in the political spectrum, really, because we can say, oh, we've got to do something about that. But then look at North Korea for all these years and say, well, they might have nuclear weapons. We don't know. And we don't have anything to do with them. So we don't care. Fuck that. Screw you. Screw your God. Screw your lack of God. Screw whatever it is that causes you to have that bifurcated kind of attitude. If you don't love the North Koreans behind that wall as much as you love the South Koreans, screw you.
But the problem again, I guess it just maybe I'm my brain just doesn't work. Obviously doesn't work the same way you do, but I'm trying to put myself in your mind, in your brain to see how you could be both at the same time. Because to me, it seems like, okay, there are humans who are evolved, and then there are other humans who are not as evolved as others. But then it depends, like if you're on the side of society on any given time, like what you're saying now, right? Let's say we go in a time machine and go back to some other time in history, whatever, and I hear someone else say the same thing that you're saying, like I can't I can't debunk them. Does that make sense?
No,
Like yes, okay, so like you're saying the way people act is because they're not evolved. They haven't gotten a specific trait from nature, from whatever, to be able to act a certain way.
our physiology and brain chemistry determine how we act, as well as our environment and other such things. So no, they're not bad. They may be socially toxic. They're
Which is
not
bad.
bad.
Let's just say
Well,
bad.
no, I won't, because I know what you mean by bad.
Yeah,
Uh,
and you don't want to
and
conform
I
to
don't
the
mean that. And
reality
no, and I don't mean that.
of what it.
It's not about conforming to reality. And the reason I said no to your question is because it's a type of subtle, and you may not even realize it.
No, it's not.
It's a type of shifting, and subject changing and context switching. And maybe I can point out to you uh, this kind of error that you're making with equating this. So you're saying, in my case, if I don't say that they're bad, but that they're just mentally ill, what happens if the world gets dominated by mentally ill people and they say we're bad? Okay, well, I think that that would represent a fairly quick end to humanity. Is what I think it would be, and I think that would be most unfortunate. However,
But
your
that would just
Christian
be nature.
hang on, your Christian worldview doesn't shift that at all. Doesn't change that at all. So
Uh,
you can have
mm,
your
yes,
sense
it
of
does.
good hang on. You can have your sense of goodness of what is good and bad, or what is right and wrong. And so I could just as easily say, yeah, okay, but what happens if the bad people take over?
Oh, then
Your answer is no better to that question than mine is. It doesn't matter what we think underlying is good and bad. Because the question of shifting to me to say, well, what happens if the bad people take over? Then what happens to your worldview? Screw that. The same thing that happens to your worldview
No,
if
so
the other side takes over.
so to respond to that, your worldview is cognizant on on, and again, you'll be like, no, 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 no. But this is what it this is what it is. The zeitgeist, the majority, the 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 consensus, if you want to use that word, uh, on what is moral, right? So society gets together and decides this is good for society moving forward, right? And so that's what shapes the worldview. But if we go to the past, we see that's the same thing that's been happening. And
Right, but
so,
that's what happens in Christian
but,
cultures
but,
too in history.
no, no, no,
Yes. So
but I'm
show me how.
answering your question.
Okay.
You're shifting the context. But to answer your question, like if everyone became evil tomorrow, then for me, I would never give the answer that you just gave about how like society is like it's based on evolution of empathy.
you would be in the same position as I'm in. You would be under the
Yes,
thumb of people that you thought were
in
bad,
space and time,
right? Right.
right.
So
But
that
I
doesn't
would still be
change.
able to say that what I'm standing for is good. So
Okay,
the people,
you can say that until they hang you, but you'd still be hanged. You'd be hanged right next to me.
right,
You'd still be
but the
hanged.
thing is, like, okay, naturalistically, if your worldview is true, then there is no real difference. Then we're at the mercy
It
of
it doesn't matter.
the winds of
Ma
change,
it
right?
doesn't matter if we
Right.
agree.
It
You know,
does matter.
if I thought it was good that we were hanged and you thought it was bad, it doesn't matter. We'd still be just as hanged.
Right,
So
but your worldview is like it's in a crisis of some
it's
kind.
no,
It's
it's
like,
not. It's
yes, it is.
irrelevant.
No, it's saying that, okay, well,
It's
I don't
utterly
want you
irrelevant.
you have to eliminate, you have to call things toxic instead of calling them bad.
Okay, if I
Well, toxic is bad.
it
Like there's never
doesn't
been
matter.
any,
Okay,
there's no such thing as toxic good.
it
Um,
wouldn't. In a very real sense, medicine
yes,
is
I'm
poison.
agreeing it
Okay.
wouldn't matter in the grand scheme
So
of things, but like your worldview is always, like based on whatever people decide,
okay,
the
but I don't.
majority decide.
That's you see, but
Mine is
why?
based on truth.
Okay,
Something
yours is based on
something is
truth, and
bad.
you will still be hanged if people who don't agree with truth go against you.
Right, but for you,
We
like
will be
if
dangling on the
but for you,
same
you don't
gallows.
have the same motivations for holding on to the truth because if society says this thing and says if you don't do this thing, you will die. From a naturalistic perspective, I don't understand. I don't see why an atheist would be like,
Look,
uh,
I'm not explaining what ought to be, and I think that's maybe you think that I'm saying something prescriptive, and what I'm saying is descriptive. This is the reality of social creatures. This is how social creatures social. All right. You can like that or you can not like that. Don't care. It is how creatures
right.
social.
And the problem between us is the part where you say don't care, because I care how social creatures interact with one another in
Well,
the sense
the way we interact
of
with one
of
is
of
we
base
negotiate all
beliefs.
kinds of things,
It's not
include it is a
so the thing is
negotiation.
no, it has to be based on truth. It has to be based on something that does not
Right,
change.
but
An
what we
understanding.
do know about the human creature is that we're never going to fully agree on what truth is, even if you're Christians in the same church sitting on the same pew next to each other, with Bibles in your hand, King James version. You are still going to disagree on some truth. And so the fact of the matter is, in order to be able to sit in that place uh, together, you're going to have to negotiate some things. These things we might have to argue about. These things we can live in peace about and differ with. It's a negotiation because you're social. And if you have someone in that church, this mythical church that I'm describing, or the one that you attend, maybe it's exactly how yours is. In that church, if you have someone who is breaking the social order all the time, but they think they're right, but they're really disruptive, your church will find some way to stop them from being disruptive because it's a society. And that's how social works. That's what happens. So, yes, right now there is a certain majority of people in any given church that believe a certain thing and accept a certain thing as true. And so their society gets based around that. And they have a tendency to freeze out other voices. But what happens when the majority of people start agreeing with those other things and now the power shifts? Well, then the power shifts, and those people who were once in charge get mad and they're not in charge, and maybe you have a war. I have no idea, but that's the story of how social creatures social. And you can't get away from that by simply saying, "But I'm right and this is Christianity." Great, you're right, and this is Christianity, but you social exactly the same way as I do.
Right, because we're all human beings. We're not distinct from one another. It's inescapable, right? But then it's the things that we hold up is that we try and find things based on common understanding of what's true. And even if
Yes.
we come to the same conclusion, but what we're concluding on is false, then we still have that subconscious idea of trying to get to the truth. The problem is with today's society is we've kind of lost that entirely.
I
We're
don't think so.
losing it.
I
I
disagree
think
with that.
so
I don't think we
very
have.
strongly,
I think that we
especially
are
when it comes to this issue of transgenderism, because you just laid out a view that's in the vast minority of secular people. Wow, right? So you're saying, oh, kids can't have autonomy over their own bodies, right? And
no,
it's like,
I do believe that
well,
kids have autonomy or should have, in
But
fact, maybe more autonomy over their own
but
body.
arguing as a secularist who I've seen these arguments and they say, well, everyone has a right to happiness, and you're restricting that child's happiness by saying that they can't get these hormone therapies and surgeries until they turn 18.
All right, let's get back to here, though. I want to hear more about Molech and the destroyer. So here we go.
And this is the sin that brought judgment and destruction to Israel. What will it do to America? But now we have to go deeper. As I looked at the inscriptions from Mesopotamia concerning this goddess, the enchantress, I found something strange. She says, I am a woman, and then she says, I am a man. One of her hymns praises her, saying, you are the one who turns a man into a woman and turns a woman into a man. You want to understand what's really happening in our culture? It goes back to this. This is her deeper work. She doesn't do it at the beginning because it's too radical to have done it decades, but as the culture gets possessed, as she becomes entrenched in the culture, this is the deeper work that begins manifesting, and so it has. This is the spirit that confuses gender, that replaces gender, merges, blends male and female, boy and girl, is going to enter the culture, and so it has. One of the ancient inscriptions of this goddess says she grinds away the masculinity of men. So a spirit has entered our culture, we all know this spirit, that seeks to emasculate men, rages against them as did the goddess, remove them from their calling as fathers, as husbands, as protectors, as manhood, and seeks to emasculate them or feminize them. At the same time, the goddess, it says, turns women into men. So we have a spirit in our culture that is seeking to transform women, defeminize women, masculinize women, take them away from womanhood, take them away from marriage, take them away from life, from motherhood. See, the goddess was female, but with masculine characteristics. So she seeks to make women in her image and ultimately destroy women. That's why there's even a movement now to remove the word woman. But her power actually went deeper. The goddess had a mysterious priesthood. They were men who walked around her temples, filled her temples, who dressed in women's clothing. Parents would take their children to see these men in women's clothing perform. If you see that happening again in your culture, know it's a sign that something very dark is possessing the culture. And remember what Messiah said. When the spirits come back, they come back worse In ancient times, she possessed her priesthood, but now she is seeking to possess an entire generation of children. The gods are always after the children. Because if you can get the children, you can possess the nation and you can possess the future of that nation.
Okay. That's good. Um, yeah, I was gonna wait for a while to open this can of worms, but let's open it now. Uh, gods, spirit demons, whatever you want to call them. I'm calling them gods, small g. Um, he is definitely speaking of them, Baal, Molech, this temptress, I've forgotten the name that he uh, has given her, uh, and he did not name the destroyer uh, at all. So we can only guess who he's talking about unless he brings it up later. But he definitely believes that these gods are real, that they were real spirits, real beings that possessed people and possessed nations, possessed the world somehow. That they influenced people to do things in certain ways. So he's not talking about just sinful human nature causing people to do things, and then just speaking anthropomorphically.
Pomorphically.
Thank you. He's not speaking about it in that way. He's speaking about these spirit demon gods as real creatures who did real things. And so I think I know the answer from you, but I just want to make sure I know the answer from you by asking you: do you see the the spirit world, I guess, the same way he does, that these are real beings who came here, owned the earth, and who were able to cause people to do things like sacrifice their children and change their sexuality? And I guess the natural follow-up is, do you believe that those spirits are back again doing it here in America? Um, and even worse than they did before, as he was saying. So, what are your thoughts about that?
The answer is gonna be both yes and no. Yes, because definitely it's definitely observable that in cultures where people are deathly afraid of offending certain spirits, what tends to happen is the stuff he's describing. So again, back to that Indonesian culture. Forgetting the name, I'll post it maybe in the comment section. What they do is the reason that they do that to twins is because they're afraid if they keep both of them, something bad will happen. So they have like an omen and they have like a witch doctor, and they have to do these things because they're afraid of the spirits. Now that sounds ridiculous in America, but uh, say someone gets pregnant and it wasn't intentional, uh, and they are like, okay, now I'm in a financial bind. I can't raise this kid and I can't drop out of school. And so they're like, we have to kill this child. So the parallel he's drawing is that even though it's different cultures doing different things for the same, like they're doing the same action, um, the reason behind it is because of these spirits. They're influencing the decision. Uh, for one person living in America, it's comfort and financial security, and for the other person, it's they're afraid of the spirits. They're gonna bring bad stuff in their life.
Okay,
And he's saying like
that's
that's
still a
how they
little
influence.
that's still a little vague for me, though. So let's call this
Well,
temptress
it's not
spirit. l- Let's
this.
let's let's
Okay,
give this temptress spirit a name so that we can speak directly. Aphrodite, because I think that's
okay,
one of the
sure.
names that he gave her. So, do you believe that there is an actual demon spirit
Whose
being
job is to like,
named
uh-huh.
Aphrodite who is walking around in the world causing people to sacrifice children.
No, I don't agree with him like with the way he's talking about it. I don't think it's that linear, that's simple. So he's saying the reason, again, I don't know for sure. I don't know his entire theology, but just based on this video, he's saying that the reason people do abortion is because they're being influenced by evil spirits. And I don't think that's entirely true. I think there's a lot more going on. And so even from like a naturalistic perspective, uh, if humans used to do this in the past, then it's not a shock that they do it in the present. Like it's just, is this part of human nature, human
Agreed.
DNA? Like, are we just like the animals, right? There are animals who eat their own young. Are we just keeping in step with that evolutionary thing?
Yeah,
Or are
I
we
think
like,
so.
right, right. So naturalistically, the reason would be that we're just animals, right?
Well, right.
But
So
he's
we don't.
like,
I think more sophisticated this way of saying it is we don't require another explanation for why we would do things like that. So
yeah, that's the natural explanation. But then we ask ourselves, like, are we just like animals, like how, like the beasts of the field and the birds of the air and everything? Like, are we just that, or are we more? Do we have a dual nature of some kind that we have to like transcend just being beastly animals?
right, but
And
even
that's
if we have a dual nature, that would not uh, require some greater explanation. Because if we have a dual nature, you could just say our human nature or sin nature pushes us toward doing that. So we don't have to. We don't have
towards
to.
doing beastly things. But then
Okay,
there's
right.
another thing about human beings that makes them separate from animals is that we do things that other animals don't do, which makes us better than them. Would you agree with that?
No.
No.
No, and not as you've worded it. I want to be generous to your idea, but let me explain the no. I don't think that a person's ability to do more things than another person makes them better. And so
To do
I
better
was
things.
and so I
No.
would say the same would be true with animals. The fact that we can do things that dolphins can't do doesn't make us better. And the fact that dolphins can do things that we can't do doesn't make them better. So
So we're the same.
I don't think about taxonomy in terms of better or worse based on your capabilities. I would think of taxonomy as higher and lower on the scale based on your abilities. And so we are taxonomically higher than other creatures. I don't think that means, though, that just because we're capable of giving 10% of our money to some charity makes us better than other animals.
So in terms of us being different, what would you say makes us different from animals on like out like what is it? Or is there something special about human beings, or there's nothing special about human beings?
Well, okay. If I just say this in the craziest possible way, Kahn, by the way, Jonathan Kahn, it's sitting there right on the screen. I would say that nothing makes us different in kind. I don't think that we are ontologically different. Um, so I think that you're trying to ask a question about ontology. And so I don't think that we are ontologically different from the apes. I think that we're more evolved. Uh, and I don't think that that creates a difference of ontology. Now, it does create a different of evolutionary scale. It does create a difference in taxonomy, and it does mean that we cannot mate with apes anymore. It can't happen. So that's that's one of the differences. Apes can't mate with dogs. They can try, but you're not going to produce an ape dog, and we're not going to produce an ape human. So there are definitely moats between you know species of animals, but I don't think those moats that separate the animals are ontological differences. They're
Right.
species
So
differences, but they're not
Okay.
ontologically of different stuff. We're all made of the same star matter as every other creature on this earth.
Right, but if someone says you're acting like an animal, then that can't be an insult at all, right?
I don't
Because
think it,
I am an animal.
but we just have to understand what they mean. So what they mean is you're acting like a lower animal. Uh, we're not saying there's a difference between one
Right.
animal and another. It would be just as weird if apes acted like lizards. They don't act like lizards. And so if apes could talk and one of their own was doing something very lizard-like, they would say you're acting like a lizard. So if you're saying of humans, you're acting like an animal, we just mean that you're acting as lower animals. And I
Which
would,
is not wrong in a big picture sense.
it,
Because
uh,
what's wrong with acting like a lower animal? There's nothing wrong with that.
well, for
Like
instance,
sleeping,
if you're like acting like an animal that is not a social creature, and you
well,
are a social creature, that can be wrong, socially speaking, because that would cause you to do antisocial things. You're a social creature living in a society, and so you don't get to act like a lizard in this society. uh, you don't get to act like a
but
non-social
it's
creature.
so then it's about like preference and the majority, right? The majority of people
It's about a functioning
say you're
society.
doing stuff that is not helping, so just leave. But again, this might need to be expanded out in a future
Well,
show. But if that's how it is, then it all then depends on getting the most people on your side. It's not about getting to what's right or what's true or what's even like moral, whether humans are on the planet or not. It it depends on getting the most people to agree with you on what is right for society. And if you can do that, then that's what's right, just based on how I understand naturalism. It's not it has to be a numbers game. It can't be anything else, right?
I disagree, and I don't think that very many naturalists would put it that way. I certainly wouldn't. So I don't think that's a good representation or a good way of feeding back what we've been saying about that. That
Right,
said,
but uh,
social is a matter of negotiation. There's no
majority.
social. No, I didn't say majority. I said negotiation. There is no social without negotiation because you have to live in close proximity with another person. We simply can't live any other way. So we need, the output of what other people do. I'm wearing clothes that I did not make. I'm eating food that I did not harvest. I'm in a house that I did not build. And you can go all the way down the animal kingdom, and all social creatures are like this. So we have to have negotiation if we are going to be successfully social. It Majority is not so much uh, the way I would put it, because if I need someone to build me a house, if I can find a builder that will allow me to pay them back, let's say by some of the services that I can provide professionally, then great. We can negotiate and figure out a way to do that because I need a house and he needs the services. The majority way of doing it is just to hand them some money, but we don't have to do it the majority way. We get to negotiate. What would be wrong is if we made that negotiation, he built a house, and I didn't follow through with my agreement to give him the services.
Um, but the thing is, like in some cultures, so again, it's not a universal thing either way, because the way I'm hearing you is you're saying, okay, we've agreed to this, but there are other places where they agree different things. So like for some places it's like, okay, you'll marry my daughter if you can build me this house. Or or even worse, uh you can get sexual favors if you can do this for me, and things like that. And that's what the general society has agreed to and said this is right. And in the sense, going back to the video, um, what he's saying, again, as I'm understanding him, is that these spirits influence people to think that they can do immoral things, right? Wrong things like killing children or like, you know, being confused about their gender. And all these things don't just have a natural component to them. That there's a bigger force out there that makes human beings do things that are unnatural or inhuman
Okay,
or
so, uh,
unhuman,
that's one of the questions I wanted to ask you.
inhumane.
We've talked about this before, and you may choose to pass on this, I understand. A couple of years back, it was part of the season finale or close to the season finale of, a season of Skeptics and Seekers, and so I'll just ask you the same question. Maybe you've had time to refine your answer a little bit. You're saying that these demons, these actual demon god spirit things can influence you to do things. How?
Well, one way would be to make things about the world seem more appealing than the most valuable thing in the universe or being, which is following God, like following the supreme being of the universe. So
Okay,
if
I get that,
I,
but how do they
right,
do
but
that?
I'm
How do
saying,
they make it
like you're
seem more
asking for the,
appealing?
well, like you'd have to ask them, like I'm just gonna theorize. I don't know if you'll accept this answer, but let me imagine myself as trying to influence uh thought, like just based on culture that I'm seeing in America and how it's degrading in certain ways. So, for instance, if I don't want men to respect women, right? What I would do is I would say, hey, you can catch these videos of women being degraded by men online. Like you can watch them as entertainment. There's nothing immoral about it because it's two consenting adults. So you just watch that stuff. It's not, don't don't like worry about talking about women in real life. Like that's one way. And what happens if something like that happens is the person who gets addicted to things like pornography, they develop, like you can prove this scientifically, their view of women goes down. Like they think less of them. People who are addicted to porn, people who are addicted to drugs, right? Their view of reality, their view of life in general goes down. So that would be one way. You introduce something novel and you say this is better than that. And then when the person starts engaging in the new thing you've introduced, the thing that is actually good for them seems awful. It becomes less in value. So it's not necessarily like brain control where it comes like and zaps you or and makes you move your arms up or arms down. It's more like changing how you see things in life. It's
Okay,
like putting a
for that to
filter.
happen though, they have to communicate with you somehow. So is Aphrodite talking to people in their heads?
No, no, I
Okay,
don't. No, not as I understand it. Like not it's like not like the way that guy Troy was saying. Like
then I
you
don't
know,
understand.
I
Then I
heard,
don't
but like,
understand how a demon
well,
influences you
well,
to
I
do anything. Then
I'm saying in the sense of like I'm using naturalistic language that you can parse and understand, right? So like if a culture starts saying, there's nothing wrong with watching pornography, if a culture starts saying that, there's gonna be consequences. Now, a demon would influence a society by making that thought more popular. And it's like, is it like what's the very first contact um point? Is it like telling someone? I don't know. Maybe that's telling one person or telling a group of people. Maybe. I don't know. That could be one way. But in general, how it works is that it starts with an idea in someone's head, and then that idea becomes the general norm of an entire society, so that you have people addicted to something that they weren't addicted to a few generations before.
Okay, but
And
you've completely disintermediated the demon's actions from the social action.
I
You
have
just say,
not.
well, but what you're saying is there's a social action and a social consequence, but the demon is behind it somehow. But
Not somehow.
what we have is a huge gap between how you believe that demons can accomplish any of that. Because
You're,
I don't see it at all how a
of
even
course
if
you
a
don't
demon
see.
or but even if a
Yeah.
demon wanted to influence you
Mhm.
to do something, I don't see any kind of mechanism where they could do it, and I'm asking you how on earth could
But you're asking
Aphrodite.
for an empirical way, like a demon appears on CNN or something, right? Is that something like that? Is that
Well,
what you're
sure,
asking?
yeah, well,
Well,
I'm
that's
asking,
not gonna happen
okay, well,
because demons
if
don't
you're
interact
influence
like.
if you're gonna influence me, you have to communicate with me. You have to show me a poster, so
Okay,
that I can at
so
least see it. You've gotta so
let's say a demon, okay, let's say a demon wants to deceive you, David,
mhm.
and he knows that if he were to appear to you, then oh boy, your worldview would change in an instant. Why would that demon do that if they're trying to deceive you?
Right, I'm not, arguing that, so that's fine.
Right. But
So
so
if they
then,
want to deceive me, how are they going to do it if they don't if they can't interact with me directly in my head, if they can't talk to me, if they can't possess someone
by
to talk to me,
influencing the people that you look up to in society,
what
who,
does
who
influence mean? I don't know what that word means. You've
so
intermediated the
like,
word
okay, so
influence
someone
from
influence.
any action.
All right, let me explain it then step by step. Let's say there's a guy, six degrees of separation, right?
Mhm,
There's a guy who's like into witchcraft or whatever, or is new age, right? You don't believe in that stuff, right? But
mhm,
this person is into that stuff, right? But they also identify as an atheist. So they're into that stuff. They go on the Joe Rogan podcast and they talk about it. Super famous person, right? And then that person's ideas, right? They're talking about their ideas, like I was taking these drugs once. I was having visions about reality, and this is what I saw, and I think this is what's best for humans, right? Someone hears that podcast and relays it to their friend. Then their friend relays it to a respected scientist, and the scientist takes those ideas and they go on another podcast that you listen to, right? So you've already been separated from the source, which is that guy who does the witchcraft and
right,
is
but
into new age things, right?
the part that you're missing with your example, and I hope
I'm
you
not
get
done
to.
yet, bro,
Okay,
but okay.
but let me tell you the part that you're gonna have to get to for this to even be meaningful. Uh, in that example, someone actually communicated with someone else, and they communicated with
Yes,
someone else. There's no
yes, that's what
mysterious
I'm saying.
communication, okay?
That
There's
you're saying because you don't experience it, then it doesn't exist. I'm saying that's not how it works because there are people who do believe in this stuff, who do communicate, who do influence the culture.
right.
That's
No,
what
no,
I'm
no.
saying.
I'm saying that I believe in cultural influence. You can definitely influence exactly the way you said, but that first person who started the witchcraft, what you have to convince me of and or explain is how a demon convinced that person to get into witchcraft, because I
I
understand
how
how that
why
person
how
can.
would I why would they get into witchcraft if they're not convinced of its power or its
Who
truthfulness?
convinced them? Was it another person? You can't say it's people all the way down. At some point,
I'm not saying it's people.
okay, then
I'm not
at some
saying it's people. I'm
okay, so
saying
at some
there's a
point,
chain of events.
I'm sorry, at some point, Aphrodite or one of her foot soldiers has to say something to a person.
Right. And that how far that goes back, I can't tell you. You want me to tell you like, okay, let's go talk to Johnny who lives on this street. He's the first person who experienced the demon. I can't tell you that because I don't know. I can't tell you I know if I don't know.
Okay,
And so the thing
but
is that
so are you?
wait, let
But
me
it sounds like,
finish.
hang on, it sounds like you're denying though at first,
I'm
and
not
now
denying
are
anything
you
because you're not
okay?
listening to me.
Are you saying then that at some point in the past, a
Oh
demon,
my
an
God.
actual demon, talked to somebody and influenced them to do something? Well, so you're not
Right,
saying
because
that.
how else do these religions start? That's how they start, where people are like doing witchcraft, they're
Okay.
communicating. to spirits, but you don't believe that. But I'm trying to
It
answer your
doesn't matter that I
question,
don't believe
and
that. I
you're not
it,
letting me answer it.
no,
So
I
I
think that
guess
is
we can move on,
I
man. Let's
do
just move on with
no,
the
I
video.
do. I am accepting that answer to the question. That's what I
You're
was trying
not.
to. No, I am. That's exactly what I didn't know and what I was trying to get at, and what it seemed like you were denying. So so in other words, at some point, Aphrodite, Nephti, whoever we're talking about, talked to somebody and
Yes, that's what
influenced
I'm
them.
saying. Yes,
Okay.
that's what I've been saying the whole time, but you haven't
Mm,
been letting me finish the whole thought. And the thing is, yes, that has to happen at some point. It could have been 100 years ago, and the chain of events reached to you, and you never even knew about it because you've grown up in a society that's super, super naturalistic and materialistic. So it's not that, okay, I haven't seen it, then that means that doesn't happen. It just means that at some point that did happen to an individual, and you're like, well, I have no proof of that. Okay, great, but that's not the point we're
right.
making. The point being made.
I'm not asking for proof. I was asking for an explanation of how a demon would influence. And I was saying, are they talking to people in their heads? And you're saying no. And
No,
now
I
you're
wasn't.
saying yes.
No, oh my God, David, listen to what I'm saying. What I'm saying is this: at some point, these religions like Wiccanism and all the other witchcraft religions, right? They had people who adhered to these spirits and they listened to them. So when
Right.
you
So
and
at point
others, wait, can I finish, bro? Let me finish and then I'll
okay.
let you talk. Okay? I'm getting agitated because you're cutting me off like right as I'm about to get to the point. Like every single time you're just cutting me off. And here's the thing, at some point, someone got contact from these spirits and they started communicating with them. And then they passed down that knowledge, and that knowledge keeps going down and it seeps into the culture. That's how it happens. I don't understand where the confusion is coming from. I
It,
generally don't.
the confusion was coming from because when I first set up the question way back then, I asked if you believed that Nefertiti, Aphrodite, whoever we said, was talking to people to influence them. And
Talking to everyone.
no, the simpler answer would have just been yes, that's
That's
how they
what I
got the ball
said.
started. Okay, well
Oh, you
I didn't hear.
rewind this footage and listen to what I said.
Oh, we
I said,
will.
yes, I said influence people. And then you said, oh, does that mean talking to people in their heads? And then I started explaining it, and then you started cutting me off.
Okay,
But that's okay.
so let's follow that then. Now that I have a better understanding of what you mean, if they influenced someone 4,000 years ago to sacrifice babies, and then that went away, uh,
It didn't go
how
away.
this is so confusing. So let, they did it 4,000 years ago. They talked to one person, and that influenced a culture. And but that culture has been, influenced by God now. Um, and so that other influence has either gone away or faded. Is is the demon, Aphrodite's foot soldier, is that demon still working in the world to talk to somebody? Or is it all just a naturalistic process from that initial conversation? Oh, well, now that God's gone, that old influence, even though those people are dead, arises again? Or do they have more conversations with more people once they stop listening to God and they get back involved in communicating with people? I'm trying to figure out
This is
how
like a
that sort of thing
meaningless question
happens.
because I don't understand how answering it helps you. Honestly, I
It
can't
it
understand
it
how.
you don't have to understand how it helps me. It helps me by understanding your position so that I don't straw
No,
man it.
because no, understanding my position. You understand my position. It's that I don't know. Now you're adding more layers to it,
Well,
right?
no, I'm not adding more. I'm trying to understand your position. So I understand that you are saying that at some point these beings had to communicate with humans at some point. But
Humans figure
we're
that
talking about
thing
the
out. Great.
influence. We're talking about the
Right.
influence coming back and the demons, possessing a nation even more than they did before. And
Right,
so
which is what the other
does
guy
that
is talking about,
right? So
right? So
does
you're
that mean?
mixing two beliefs
Let me
here.
ask the question: does that mean that the demons are back talking to people again and
That's
influencing them?
That's what he's saying, right? I'm not saying that. Okay? Just listen to what I'm saying. He's saying that these demons come in waves and then they go back and then they come in waves much stronger. And he's using a parable that Jesus gave to explain his rationale. For me, how I see it is that like, you don't even need like demons whispering in people's minds every day. All you need is for one person, one influential person to know or to have a communication from some kind of spirit telling them or for them to be into that world of witchcraft and visions and new ageism. One influential person to have that and to use their naturalistic uh their naturalistic influence and money to influence a whole group of people into doing things, right? So, from a naturalistic perspective, we are seeing things happening in our culture that resemble past cultures, but it's not because there's a separate demon that's going and whispering into people's ears and telling them do evil. All it takes is a domino effect. It takes one person. That's how I'm arguing it. But you think, okay, that's crazy because you don't believe in this stuff, right?
Okay,
But
you
I'm
should stop
saying
worrying about what
if a
I.
demon, no, I'm saying this. It doesn't have to be every single person, and it doesn't have to be mind control. Like I don't even see mind control making its way into this conversation at all.
I didn't say anything
I
about
just,
mind control. I
I,
have not.
well,
I
someone
have
in the
not.
chat said mind control. He said, "Can they control the minds of humans?"
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
okay, but
well,
I have not said anything about mind control because I don't think that mind control is necessary based on your explanation. I am
and
trying
I'm
to
not,
understand your
yeah, right,
position.
and I don't think it is either. So when it comes to uh uh talks of demons and demon possession, I don't think mind control even comes into the story, comes
Right.
into the factor.
You're just talking about influence based on some version of communication somewhere down the line. And so I get that. Uh so once the chain has started with an initial communication, then it sounds like from your position then naturalism just kind of takes over from there.
Yeah,
Because
naturalism
that
is
thing
more
is
than enough to
already
take over.
right, that
Yeah.
thing is already in the culture. And so if you turn to God, then you turn away from that sort of thing. But if you turn away from God, that sort of thing is still there in the natural culture, and so you go back to it. Um,
Yes,
okay,
you got it. Yeah,
that is what I was trying to get to. This
finally.
understanding of what you think. You're worried so much about what I think about what you think that you weren't telling me what you think. So it, don't worry about what I think about what you think. That's irrelevant. I just want to understand your position because not every Christian is the same. This guy, he's way beyond what you think, and so you two are not thinking the same thing. And I didn't think that you did, but I wasn't sure where the nuance was. And now and I hope the audience has a much better idea about that. We can talk about whether whether that idea makes sense. But I that's what I was getting at. And I will tell
If
you if
if you don't believe in spirits, it doesn't make sense at all.
no,
Like,
what your argument is coherent. That's what I mean by makes sense. I don't
okay,
there are lots of arguments that can be coherent that aren't right, but I'm just looking for coherence here so I can understand how you see it.
right. And
Right.
how I see it is based on that. You only need to corrupt, not even just need to correct select few people. Like you meant like here's an example. Like if I can corrupt the most influential people, like look at what's going on in the world today, right? Wars everywhere. Do I need to corrupt every single Israeli or Palestinian or Russian or Ukrainian? Or do I only need to corrupt the guys at the very top of the chain? If I was a demon, right? I'll just go and tell Putin, hey, screw America, let's go and expand into Europe. That's all I need to do, and then chaos erupts.
Sure.
That's it.
If you're worried about economy,
Right, but it's not,
of
well,
energy,
not
but
economy. It's just you're trying to expand into regions and kill people and
right,
kill
no,
innocent people.
when I say economy, if you're worried about, the preservation of energy and doing things in the most efficient way, yes, you are correct. However, if I'm a supernatural being and I can talk to people in a way that influences them, I think that I would probably do more than just talk to the one leader and
But
try
you
to
get
influence them.
more done than if you just go around and like
Right, but
you'd have to imagine that these beings are
somebody might shoot that leader, and now I gotta go do it again. So I think I would
no,
try to do,
you get
more than
more
one
done
person
if
at a time.
or with someone like Bill Gates who was all over television telling people what to do during the pandemic, right? That's he wasn't just some random guy off the street. Oh, it's Bill Gates, everyone, right? So that's an influential guy
Right.
that has a lot of influence on people. And
Okay.
even like on Instagram, you have influencers now, people who can tell people what to buy and what to like, what music to listen to. And they're called influencers, literally. So that's how you shape culture. It's not based on like every single person deciding to do something. It's just a group of people deciding, okay, this is the direction we should go.
Mhm.
And that ends up being the whole direction of the human society that they're in, wherever they are.
Okay. So, look, I'm not going to talk about how demons should do their work. I think that if they do their work that way, they're kind of stupid because Bill Gates could have died, and so you spent all that time influencing someone who died of something, and now you got to start over.
Well,
I
people
think I would
listened to
spread it
Bill
around quite a
Gates,
bit more. um,
and
I
they did.
okay,
Like,
then
it
that
wasn't
ends
just
up
one person.
being more demons
But
talking to more people.
no, but
Um,
then it ends up that the people involved were actually lying. So, and then anyway, that's not
Okay, so here's
topic for
I'm gonna
today.
offer you a deal. Well, yeah, it's okay, it's all right. Like I said, the value proposition of the show isn't the video; it's the conversation, and I think that we've provided a good value proposition. So, that said, in case this ends up getting broken up in two parts, just for the sake of it, since I've got to do some editing anyway, I will give you a choice. We can do more of the video for, oh, say another half hour, or we can move to an after show and move to a slightly different topic.
No,
So,
let's finish this video today if
okay.
we can. Yeah,
Well,
it's
I don't know. We can.
less than 15 minutes left.
Right. It's not the length of the videos. I got one that's about 12 minutes that will probably take us 2 hours to get through. But speaking of videos and coming up, we're going to do the abortion one next week, right?
Yep.
Okay. So that will be interesting. Here we go.
It began by taking prayer out of school, separating children from God, but you take God out, something else will come in, and look what has now come into the schools.
Stop it. You can't take out. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I've made this point a million times and we have talked about it, but he keeps saying it. People keep saying it. You take God out of schools and look what happens. Take prayer out of school. He is equating public prayer in front of a classroom to God being in the schools. And that is absolutely absurd and it needs to be counteracted every time uh, it is spoken. I think that is a type of paganism, a type of idolatry. It does not fit anywhere in the Jewish or Christian realm of good theology. And I think any Christian who's listening to that and who's speaking like that are themselves being influenced into idolatry, thinking that God is represented in school by a person of authority saying a incantation in front of a group of kids. And that's what it means for God to be in school. And if you stop them from doing that, then God has no power. He's out of school. And now Aphrodite moves in. That is absurd. It's wrong. And every Christian, right thinking Christian, should stand up against that sort of teaching.
I don't know. Um, the prayer that the generation that he's referring to, that world is gone. It's not coming back. So even if we were to get prayer in schools back today, it wouldn't be the kind that he wants or he likes or he approves of. Same with any other Christian. So this is just one of those things that he has to take the L on and
Well, and it's
and
but
accept. But like the thing
prayer hasn't
is,
left school. Prayer hasn't left school. Every single Christian that is a real
well,
Christian who has
well,
a real relationship with God prays in school every damn day. They're
officially, it's not recognized as something that the school does, whereas in the past it was.
right,
Uh,
but that was never necessary. It was never necessary for a school
well,
to have an official.
it was for the people who lived at that time. Again, this is the society thing, right? They got together and they said this is good for our culture if people pray. Well, that those people are all dead now, and now we
Right,
have a new
right,
society,
but
right?
God is not any less active in school because that
Well, that's not
practice was
well active in what way? Like,
active in whatever way God is active in a school.
well, active in terms of blessing or in being or not blessing the institution. So,
Blessing, protecting,
so
whatever God
well,
ever did.
that's what he means. He's saying because there's no official recognition of God as in generations past, then there's no blessing from God
Then
because
that's an idolatry.
I
Then
don't see
and
how it's idolatry. He's
it's
just saying
idolatry
that's how it
because
is.
the act of someone standing in front of a classroom praying is a picture, an image, if you will, that he looks at and says, "This is the power of God." And
No,
when
that's not how he sees it.
hang on, when it's gone, he says the power of God is gone. That's how it's idolatry. Every every real Christian with a real relationship with God prays over schools all the time. All the time. Teachers who
Right.
are real Christians pray in school, always have. Students who are real Christians pray in schools all the
And I'm
time.
not disagreeing with you, but I'm saying
And
what he's saying is big picture institutional wise. He's saying that because America has become very, very secular, then in a sense, there's no blessing from God. That's what he means that God
okay,
is. He's not
and
saying
he's
that God
wrong.
left the universe. No, no, from a theological perspective, he's not wrong.
Well, I think he is wrong. He's
No, he's
absolutely
not
wrong
wrong.
because
Theologically, he's not wrong.
what he's saying is if an institution says we are for God and they do some public worshipful things, that God will somehow bless them in a way that he will not if they don't do that institutionally. That is absurd. It's like saying that
Well,
God
no,
it's like saying that God will protect the passengers of an airplane if the pilot prays over the intercom. But when pilots stop praying over the intercom, then planes crash. That is I see that absolutely as
that's
idolatry,
not
and
the, that's bad example. It's not even the same. It's not the same thing.
I think it's a great example.
A airplane is not an
It's the
institution.
best analogy
But
I've
like
ever
the
made.
thing is that he's saying nationally, like even he's going by theologically, like in Israel when the Israelites were faithful and following God institutionally as a people, then they received blessings. When they didn't do that, and it was just pockets of people, like during Elijah's day, when it was him and it was like 7,000 other people, uh, and it was just, and then everyone else was like a follower of Baal. Like the land was cursed, the people were cursed. It was like there was famine in the land. So he's saying that's what happens. But the thing is this, he goes an extra step, which I wouldn't go by saying, hey, let's bring that back. I'm like, unless something really radical happens in America, then bringing it back would just be some weird uh, uh pluralistic prayer that accommodates everyone, which doesn't even make it sincere, nor does it make it even Christian anymore. So that's not what he wants. That's not what I want. That's not what anyone wants. So that Pandora box has been opened, and you can't close it once it's been opened. So
Okay, look,
yeah,
I can meet you part way, but let me just end this piece of the conversation with an example from the Bible. And I think it's a picture, even though it's a picture that will probably make your point seem stronger. I think it actually makes my point seem stronger on the other side to other people. So it's back when Moses was fighting some war, and the enemy would start winning if Moses had his arms down, but the Israelites would be winning if he held his arms up. And as long as he held his arms up, the Israelites were winning. But you know what happens when you hold your arms up for a long time? You get really tired and your arms start to droop. And so, to keep more Israelite soldiers from losing and to keep from losing the battle, Moses had to get two people to come to either side of him to hold his damn arms up so that they could win the war. Now, I would say that that is the very picture of idolatry that I am talking about, because for those people, in their minds, Moses had to perform this physically impossible act for God to do a thing. And what this guy is saying is, unless you have principals and teachers saying prayers over the intercom in schools, it's like holding your arms up. God will bless you. And the moment you stop, God will curse you. And I would say that if that's how God works in protecting schools and kids and so forth, he's not a God that's worth worshiping any more than the God of Moses was, who would help him win a war as long as he could do the impossible task of holding his arms up.
That's not what he's saying, though. Um, I don't know if I can explain it any better than I have already. He's not saying that it's a good luck charm to pray, to have intercom, like intercom prayers. He's just saying, again, key word is institutionally. Institutionally, when a culture says we don't want God in this sphere and we draw a line, say we don't want God in schools, right? When we do that, we're left to ourselves. That's what he's saying. Like I'm being the interpreter of what he says, because that lingo gets thrown out a lot. And if you take it literally, it just means like, hey, we need some guy to say a prayer and then we're done. But what Christians mean is when you take God out of the sphere of school and you whittle it down, even down to your private life, you're left to yourself. You're left to figure things out for yourself. And human beings are not very good at figuring things out for themselves. It takes us way longer than it should to realize that something is evil that we should stop.
That seems
So that's
to
what he's saying.
that completely ignores the power of the church, the body of Christ today. You're not left to yourself. We don't need a
Well,
theocracy. Hey,
well, I'm
we don't need a
how did
theocracy.
theocracy come? It's not a Who's asking for theocracy in
Well,
this
this guy is.
conversation?
Well,
No,
this guy
no,
seems
he's
to be
not.
though, because he's saying he's hearkening back to a time when, and you even use the word institutionally, we were Christian and could do Christian worship things institutionally,
Right.
and that is actually a sign of a theocracy, because this is,
No,
yes, it is. Education is a government enterprise. It's not a
it
private
never used to
enterprise.
be.
But
But the thing is, now
but
it
it
is,
is
right?
okay. So it's since it is.
Same with hospitals, if you didn't know that before.
I
But okay.
I have been to way more hospitals probably than you have ever passed on the street.
But
I
that doesn't mean that you're right about hospitals being like, yes, now they're run primarily by the government, but it never used to be that way. Government has come in
no,
and taken
I'm
over.
pretty sure that I've been in more religious based hospitals than otherwise. And by the way, I'm not saying that private Christian schools can't pray in school. I'm talking, and he is talking about this too. He's not talking about private schools. He's talking about public schools that are a part of the institution of this country. And he is bemoaning the fact that we can't do church in those schools. And in order to give him what he wants, you would need a form of theocracy to
He's
do it.
bemoaning the fact that once upon a time in America, right? Every single school, not just private schools, every single school used to have public Christian prayer. That's how it used to be. He's saying that brought blessing with it. Now that's not there anymore. There's no more blessing. That's what he's saying. That's all he's saying. He's not saying I want a theocracy. He and I said again, I don't think he's saying that he like I don't know, maybe I'm speaking for him, but
I think so because
we don't want
he
it
definitely
back
wants
because it won't be the same thing.
he wants
You
it
can't
back.
turn back the clock and go back to the 50s and get that culture back.
He wants it back because for in his mind the only way to
Well, he's
get
not
God's
gonna get it
blessing
back.
is to get it back.
Well,
That's his
that's
point.
well, then he's wrong, right? But then the thing is like, let's not misrepresent what he means when he says God has been taken out of schools. He's not saying that God has existentially left America and now America is like completely devoid of the presence of God. He's saying America is cut off from receiving blessings because we are kind of the most individualistic culture that has ever existed. We
Maybe,
do things
but the
ourselves.
if Christians want to do things institutionally that honor God, we have the institution for that. It is the church.
Right. But then the issue becomes even the things that the church does within its own spheres get attacked from people who are outside.
Well, and I think that a lot of that is wrong, but to the degree that churches have bought into the government institution. So, for instance, churches will like that tax exempt status. They don't want to pay the taxes. However, institutions have to pay taxes. Churches don't. Churches also have a special status, even as a 501c3. They don't have to open their books uh, to the public, and so they don't have to account for their money, how they collect it and how they spend it.
Oh, that's not
Um,
true. They have to, like, if they're audited, they have to open their books. It's just that they don't pay property tax.
well,
But they yes.
okay.
Yes.
Look, okay. Look, we can litigate that more online. That the ultimate point is churches have a special status that comes
Right,
down
which
to
is
that.
proof
Hang
that
on, that
once
comes
upon a time
down
in America.
that comes down to money in large cases, and because the church wants to keep that going, they are the ones who maintain that relationship with the government in that way. And in that way, the government has absolutely a right to speak into the church as a government supported institution. Every
No, they're
church,
not.
yes,
There's
every church,
no state churches
every
in America.
no, every church that doesn't want that has already opted out of their
So you're
501(c)(3)
saying the
status.
government should tell churches what to say and
if
what to
if
do,
the government wants tax-free
or
status, I'm sorry, if the church wants tax-free status, then they have to accept the
uh,
baggage that comes with being a government program.
straight up blackmail. But
No, it's not blackmail.
here's the point though. Here's the point. Even with you bringing that up, it's proof that once upon a time, America used to like revere churches so highly, even though there was the whole separation of church and state, that the government made a property tax exemption to churches and said, you guys are exempt from paying property taxes. Everyone else is. So that generation, though, that generation of people, they're not alive anymore. If
Right,
you
but
brought them back and you wait, let me finish.
mhm.
If you brought them back and put them in 2024, they'll be like, what's going on here? This isn't what we envisioned. But what's going on today is we live in a different generation, and those ties, right, back to the old generations, there's some ties that are still there. Like that's one of them, right? And what's happening is like the more America disentangles itself from the Christian worldview, the church is also getting disentangled from the parts that it enjoyed benefits. And one of those was like the government was friendly towards Christianity.
Right, but I would say that that means that
So it's not
there
given.
was never a separation of church and state. and we
Yes,
are
there was.
no, that's not. It's not. When
Separation
the
of church and state means that the government can't tell the church what to do, and the church can't tell the government, like, they can't do different roles. Like
it's
everyone has their
simply
own
you're simply wrong on the
lane.
facts, because if you are a 501c3, even a church, then you have to organize in a certain way. So you can't just tell the government, well, we've got bishops and elders and prophets, we're good. No, you also have to have a board of trustees, and uh, things of that nature. You have to organize in a certain way if
Yes,
you want
right.
to maintain that. And I can tell you from experience. In fact, my dad was one of the churches that my dad was preaching at. He did not want to organize that way because that's not how the church biblically is organized. And he was in favor of withdrawing their tax exempt status to be more biblical. Now, the other members in the church were not in favor of withdrawing their
More
tax exempt
biblical.
status.
Wait, biblical how? Like,
The theology of it doesn't matter here. Just follow the
no,
bigger thought. The
yeah, your
bigger
dad's wrong, but
it
okay.
does not matter whether my dad was wrong or not. The bigger thought is, he, in his mind, the church was not organized that way, and the state shouldn't have the authority to tell the church how to organize. But they do have the authority to tell the church how to organize if the church wants to maintain a 501c3 status. That is absolutely the case. And any church that wants to go rogue and do their own thing, for instance, if they want to campaign for certain candidates for public office, I have no problem with that, as long as they withdraw their 501(c)(3
I have a
status to do
problem
it.
with that because then that's not a church. That's
Okay, but your
uh,
objection is theology. That's a
no,
theological that's a
it's
theological
not.
objection.
It's
Mine
it's
mine is secular.
practical. Churches don't campaign. That's not what the church is for. That's not a church. That's what do
Okay,
you
but
call a special? What do you call them? A lobby?
that's a
A
theological
special lobby
that's a
where
theological
you
argument.
you have a group of people with uh quote
I,
unquote
I'm not disagreeing with you, but right now, if they want to do that legally, which they can do it legally, they have to do is withdraw their tax exempt status, and now the government
right,
doesn't have
which
any
is
hooks in
what
them.
atheists want to happen, right? For all
No,
the
not
churches.
why would it matter to atheists if the church down the road was
Yes, it does matter. I saw someone say that on the boards.
look,
They said,
my own personal opinion, and it's mixed up with theology. I will confess, is that churches should not be tax exempt entities, because they should not be entangled with the government. And they are doing it specifically for money and favors and things that I think are of non-spiritual.
well,
Churches want to say, give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, as long as you're an individual. But as an institution, we're going to keep all our money. No, you should probably have to pay taxes anyway. And if you're going to be an institution of the world, you also have to follow the rules of an institution of the world.
but they
But if
are following the rules. People made that a rule.
Okay, but then they're
People
tight.
made that a rule.
Then the government has
But
a right
you
to the government has a right to speak
No,
in them to
that
them.
doesn't follow. It doesn't follow to say that okay, this rule was made, and therefore the government. It's like if I do you a favor, now I'm indebted to
No,
you
it's
for
not.
life,
That's
or
just
you
called
have to
that's
tell
called
me
regulation. It's called regulation. It's the
what
same
to
way with
do.
schools. Yeah, it's the same way with schools. You've heard of Title IV funding, which deals with
Never
regulation.
heard of
So
it.
back when I was an admissions advisor, don't ask. Couple of years
You've
of my
had all
life,
jobs,
but
man.
yeah, I've been around. So back in that time, we were, very concerned about Title IV funding, because part of what admissions advisors do is sell. There's a certain there's a certain level of selling that you can't do, beyond which crosses the line of Title IV um, uh, qualification. And so that regulation is there specifically to keep institutions from doing what people like me were inclined to do, which is to get people to enroll in our schools by all means, some of which not necessarily great. Now, a school can do that. All they have to do is give up their Title IV status. But the Title IV status is a regulation that reins in the behavior of educational institutions in the country. You are not forced to be eligible for Title IV funding to be a school. You're just a business at that point, but you can be that, and lots of them are. But if you want that status, then you have to also accept that regulation. And
Right.
that is
And
the
churches
same thing.
already accept that regulation because,
That is
like
the
you
same
said,
thing with the church. If they used to get that status just for free. And I am saying, if you want that status where you get to keep your money and
well,
not pay taxes, then
it,
you have to follow the rules of a
first of all, the church does pay taxes. It just doesn't pay property taxes. Second, they do follow the rule, the ones that do get that tax exemption, just like anyone else. As an individual, you probably get tax exemptions for all sorts of things. If you have kids, if you don't have kids, all these things. So for an institution to get a tax exemption, that's not favoritism because that was codified in the law. And so the thing that the government tells the church is, hey, make sure you have a board of trustees who are able to account for every penny that you receive so that we can see where the money is going and where it's not going and all that, and a budget and everything. Government can access and see all that stuff so that they can say, okay, you guys are approved for another year or however many years of tax exemption. That's how it works. It's not that you guys can never pay taxes at all. But the thing is this, the main point back to what the video is talking about. The guy says, in the past, the government and the churches and the schools, it felt like they were singing to the same tune in the sense of like the reverence of God was high. And so he's saying in our culture today, reverence of God is low. And so his argument is because of that, then there's been like a vacuum. I think he used that language. It's a vacuum,
right.
and now you have evil spirits coming in and taking up the vacuum that's been left.
Right, but he's equating reverence of God with institutional ties, and that is what I'm inveighing against. Because a culture can be entirely reverent to God without having the church and their religious practices tied to the government. Those
Never seen such a culture in my
don't
life.
care. Uh,
It doesn't exist. Yeah. So
okay,
again,
then you're saying the only way that that Christians can be true Christians is to have their religious practices tied to the government.
no, that's not what I said.
If you don't believe it, then you agree with me.
No, that's not what I said. You can be a true Christian while you're being persecuted by Nero, right? But if you had the option of not living in Nero's Roman Empire versus living in a country like America where it's, at least for the meantime, okay to be a Christian, then you'll pick the second one. It's not like you'll pick the Nero one just to be a true Christian. Oh, I'm a real Christian. I go through persecution. And there's some people in America who want the Nero days to come back. I don't. That's
I
the reasonable thing.
I don't either, but I also
But
don't want the Christian church to become American Protestantism in the same way we have Roman Catholicism.
well, the
I
point of
don't and
Protestantism is to make sure that whatever happened with the Roman Catholic Church never happens ever again.
and yet we are doing the thing
We're
that
not.
happened. Yes, we are, because we are tying the institutions of the church to the institutions of the government. We had more to say, but due to time considerations, we decided to cut it off here. And so, until next time, we will see you in the comments. And in the meantime, we're out.